Okay, so what we're going to do is focus on putting together a works cited page, right? So who has some idea, like, what is the purpose of doing a works cited?
Coordinate your sources.
Yeah, right. So there's one, we want to cite our sources when we're doing in-text citations, right? So that if we include a quote or a paraphrase, the reader knows that those ideas aren't ours, right? And then when we do a works cited page, that is a place where a reader can go through and actually see where we got the thing that we read, right? And that could be really,
Hmm.
really helpful. It's one of those things that, like, you know, I remember thinking, like, when would I ever use a works cited page or somebody's reference page, depending on what format they're writing in. But then as you start, especially when we're working on a research project this semester, as you start reading through articles, that stand out to you, that are focused on the topic that you're writing about, there could be moments where you would read somebody's article, look at the argument they're creating, and then think, oh, I want to be able to pull on these ideas that they're presenting in their article, right? And you could go to their works cited page and see exactly what they read, where it came from, right? Like what journal it came from, what the name of the book was, whatever the case is, whatever type of source it was, and you could go through and you could read that same thing. So the whole purpose of putting the works cited page together is to let your reader know, here's exactly where to be able to find that source. It's kind of like a road map to that source, right? So when you're writing in MLA format, the works cited page, the way that you create the source, or excuse me, create the entry for each source that you're writing or that you use in your essay, has to be done identically, right? If it's out of a little tiny bit of format, then it's technically not an MLA format. So some of this might be a little bit of review because this is something that you should be doing in LR10, right? But I just want to go through specifically with our sources and be able to create those entries and give some examples of those. This way, when you write your paper for this first essay, I like to do these together because it should be as simple as possible, that you should be able to just, like, literally see the examples we did today, grab them, put them into your works cited page, turn them in for the homework this week, and then when you put your final version of your essay together next week, just like grab that works cited page, copy it over into your essay, and you'll get every point available because it'll be 100% correct. Okay, so let's take a look then at how we would put together a works cited. So let me share my screen with you really quick, and then we'll go in and take a look at the resource that we'll use, which is a free resource, right, that I've mentioned multiple times this semester, and I'll use it throughout the semester. But that is University of Purdue's OWL, which is their online writing lab. So I'm just gonna, and I linked, this is a resource on Canvas also, under the assignment for this week. So I'm just doing a quick search for Purdue OWL, and that's going to bring it up. And this is, again, we've looked at this before in some of our mini lessons, University of Purdue's online writing lab, which has tons of great resources. And one of the things is it's like a style guide, right? So instead of having to buy a book that gives you stuff on MLA format, you could just do a quick search for, I just went to the little search function up here at the top right, and I just did a search for MLA works cited. And then it gives me the first hitting, brings up kind of basic format, right? And so what this will do is this will give you a basic format for a works cited page. It'll give you basically everything you're going to need as far as like a style guide on how to put together a works cited page, right? And so we're going to look through some of this together. There's also some really helpful stuff in here. There's like a sample works cited page so you can look at one. There's all different like entries that are talked about in here, right? And so we're going to be looking together at how to be able to put one of these together and then put together our own version of works cited for the sources that we're using in this essay. So depending on what type of source you're using, right? Depending on if you're using a book or an article from a magazine or an article from an online journal or a TED Talk or a tweet or a YouTube video or whatever type of source you're using, the way that you cite that source can change just a little bit, right? Because the information that you have is just a little bit different. And so you can see, for example, if I go to this sample works cited page, here's an example of a works cited that's written by I don't know, a writer on whatever topic this person's writing on. But you can see like the way that the works cited page is put together, some of these look a little bit different, right? Some of them have URLs, right, which take you directly to websites. Some of them have the names of journals. Some of them have the names of books. Some of them have the names of films, right? So it's like they really, really vary because this writer is using multiple different sources in their essay. And one of the things you can see about when this writer puts together the works cited page is all the sources are listed alphabetically, right? So when you put together your works cited page, and this is going to be written under kind of like the overview section, if you spend some time reading through these pages on the OWL, it's going to be written alphabetically, right? The way you put in your entries for your sources. So not the way they appear in your paper. Sometimes I get asked that question, like, do I put the first one that I put in my paper? So like, for example, if you used a DJ second and you started with using blind spot, right? Because you're using blind spot and the writer's last name starts with a B, you would think, oh, well, maybe I would use blind spot first, but flip them around. So it's always going to be putting your sources alphabetically. So whatever that last name is first, if that's the first person, regardless of the last source using your essay, that's the order that you're going to put them in, right? The other thing that you're going to notice just by looking at the works cited page is you're going to title your works cited page works cited. It stays double spaced, right? But I think one of the big things that you're going to see, and we'll do an example of this together, is the indentations are reversed, right? And it should have been covered also, you went through this in LR10, but we call these hanging indentations, right? So what that means is it's easy for you to see where one source ends and the next one begins, because instead of doing it the opposite way where we indent over at the beginning of a paragraph when we're writing our papers, here we indent the second line on, and then the first line is not indented. So it's kind of like a inverted version of indenting when you're doing your works cited page. The other thing that you'll notice when you're looking at these works cited pages is we don't have to write number 1, number 2, number 3, or anything like that, right? If you look at these examples, here's one source, here's a second source, here's a third source, and so on. And the way that we know that is because the writer is giving us those hanging indentations. So we see at all on how this is formatted so far? So putting together a works cited page is, according to my computer, my internet connection is unstable. My kids must have hopped back on their online class, but everything seems to be streaming okay. So it's pretty easy to put a works cited page together, right? Because literally all you have to do is copy things exactly as they appear in the style guide. So basically, like with the section that I'm going to show you on Purdue's OWL, it's literally take the information for the book that you have, the source that you have, the TED Talk that you have. In this case, we're using 2 books and 1 TED Talk, depending on which one of those sources you included your essay, right? And then you just take the style guide and literally copy it over identically. It's kind of like doing like, like sometimes like my son will do like the little kind of like color by numbers pictures, right? Where it'll be like all the number 1s will be colored blue and all the number 2s will be colored green. And it like literally it's just copy this exactly as it appears. And when you're done, you're going to have the picture that you were trying to draw. Like MLA formatting and writing works cited pages, like we talked about last time when it came to in-text citations, like we don't have to keep that stuff memorized, right? Instead, it's just use the style guide and copy it over exactly as it appears. So here's an example of that. So over here on the left-hand side of this table, it's going to give us the way that we would cite books, right? Because both Blind Spot and Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime, are going to be possibilities of what will be in your second essay, right? Remember, your second essay has to include 2 sources between Blind Spot, Born a Crime, or Adichie's TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story. So you're going to be having for sure 2 of these, right? And then your homework in this week is going to be putting together your works cited page for the 2 sources you're planning on using in your essay. So here, I'm just going to click on works cited page books. And then this is going to give me a breakdown on how to do basic book formation. So right away at the top, we can see here's a book with 1 author, which is what we have with Trevor Noah's book, right? And the second one, here's a book with more than 1 author, which is what we have with Blind Spot, right? So literally all we need to do to be able to cite the source is to be able to take the information that we have in the book, right? And so you should all have a copy of Danger of a Single Story, or excuse me, of Born a Crime, right? So you should be able to get all the information that you need for this book in the book. And it's not going to be a lot that we need to cite books. Books is the easiest thing to cite, right? And we're going to do together for this. And then also, if you don't have the book yet for some reason, but by now the bookstore should have them all in, but for some reason you don't, you can find all the information that you need to be able to cite this book just on Amazon, right? Like it'll tell you who the publisher is, what year it was published, all that kind of stuff. So if we look at book with one author, literally this is all we need. So it says the author's name or the book where the single author's name appears, last name and first name format. And here is the basic form for a book citation. And then it's broken down right here. This is all we need. So we need the last name, the first name, the title of the book, the city of publication, the publisher, and the publication date. And that's it, right? So everything that we need for Trevor Noah's book is written in his book, right? And then the format, if we look at the way that it's broken down, right here in this little section that I have highlighted, it's literally last name, comma, first name, and then a period. Then we put the title of a book in italics, and then another period. And then the city of the publication, a comma, the publisher, a comma, a publication date, and then a period. So this seems really, really small, like the period after the first name, or the comma after the publisher before the publication date, or the period after the publication date. However, remember, if it's not written exact, then it's not an MLA format. So like we talked about with in-text citations or with MLA headings or things like that, there are going to be times that if you write a works cited page, or if you forget to put one of those little periods or a comma or something like that, like some teachers who take MLA formatting or APA formatting, whatever style you write in, pretty seriously might look at that and be like, oh, technically it's not an MLA format, boom, you could lose points, right? Like I'm not going to take it that serious, but I do want you to just get in the practice of being able to make sure that all these things are there. And it, like I said, it's not difficult. It's literally just copying it exactly as it appears. That's all you have to do, right? So let's do an example for Trevor Noah's book. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna copy this really quick, or I'll just, yeah, so we can see it together. And then I'm gonna open it up in Pages and we're gonna take a look at it together. So then, let me share my Pages with you. Okay, so if we're putting together the works cited page, right, like right away on my word processor, it's already set to double spaced, right? And now all I'm gonna do is just in the center, I'm just gonna title this just like you would do, right? Your works cited page is another page in your essay. It doesn't count as the content of your essay, right? So if you ever like in a class, it's like, oh, this should be a 4-page essay or a 2,000 or 1,000-word essay or whatever. Like your works cited page does not count as page number 4. Like it's always that much content, right? So you'll just title it works cited and then move on to the next line and you'll move on to your first paragraph, right? So once you're in here, remember, you would just put them together in the order that's alphabetical for your essay. But since we're talking about Trevor Noah's book first, I'm just going to take that little section that I copied over here, and then I'm going to paste it right here. And then we're going to do this example together for Trevor Noah, right? So let me just minimize this font size really quick so it's not super big and put it in Times New Roman. Okay. So all we need then is we need his last name, comma, his first name, and we'll just start with that. So it's like super duper simple, right? Like there's really absolutely nothing to this. It's just me copying over exactly what has to be there. When you put together the title of the book, you can notice the title of the book should appear in italics. Remember in the last mini lesson, I talked about small works are in quotation marks, longer works like novels, books, things like that are in italics. So then if the book has a subtitle, which his book does, you also have to make sure that you count over that subtitle. So after the main title, you would put a colon and then the name of his subtitle, which is Stories from a South African Childhood. And then after the title of his book comes a period. Oops, I'll spell childhood correctly. Okay, so, and this time I'm really gonna spell it correct because I'm gonna do spell check. All right, so now that part's done, right? Literally nothing to it. Name, last name, first name, name of his book, full book name, right? It also includes the subtitle. And now I have to go to city of publication. So all I have to do is just use my copy of my book, look around for publishing information, which is usually like somewhere in like the second or so page of the book, right? You could also find this information by using Amazon if you don't have the book in front of you. But as soon as I look at the book, I open it up and then I could see that the city of publication is New York, right? And so all I have to do in here is just replace this with New York. And then I leave this comma there. I put down the name of the publisher. And the name of his publisher is Spiegel and Graw, and the publication date, and then I'm done. Which is 2016. That's it. The only thing that I'm missing is the second line has to be a hanging indentation. And that's it. So now that I'm done with this, this is an example of a perfectly formatted entry for Trevor Noah's Born a Crime, right? Like literally nothing to it. Like all I did was I just went on to Produce OWL, got the format, took the format, copied it over here, and replaced that format with the information that I needed for his book. Are there any questions at all about doing that? Like I said, it's super duper straightforward, right? If I was doing Blind Spot, I would do the same exact thing, except for this time, the only thing that would change was if it has a book with more than one author, right? I would put their names and look at what the little difference is here. The order of the authors the same way they are presented in the book, starting by listing the first name that appears on the book in the last name. First name format, subsequent authors' names appear in normal order. So you can notice here, look at the only differences. It started with last name, first name on the first writer, and then the second writer went first name, last name. And then that's literally all you have to do. Any questions at all about that difference between Blind Spot and Trevor Noah's book? You would just include another name of a writer. And then again, everything that you would need would be right there, right? I included, if you see under where the assignment is for turning in the works cited page, all the information I'll show you really quick on Canvas where I included that. Share screen, share this. Okay, so you should be able to see my Canvas in just a second. Okay, so let me go to this week's module. And so here's everything you need for Blind Spot, right? Right under where the assignment is, Blind Spot, and Blind Spot also has a subtitle, and then the names of the writers, published by Bantam Books, published in New York in 2016. So if you use Blind Spot in your essay, everything you need to write your works cited entry, which is just the writer's names, the title of the piece, the year it was published, the place it was published, and the publishing company, boom, done. That's all there is to it. And you just put it in the same format and how it should appear according to this right here. Questions at all about that? Really straightforward. Like this is kind of one of those like, I don't know, boring ones where I'm like, yeah, there's really no exciting way to teach MLA formatting. It's just like literally copy it over exactly as it appears. But there is like, we've learned about some of these in LR10, right? Like there are these different tools that we could use. And I'm going to show you an example of one that works really, really easy. So you could use like Cite Machine. That's a good one. There's Easy Bib, there's Auto Bib, right? Like any of these work. Bib citation. So like, for example, if I just go to like Cite Machine, and I would want to get to create a citation. Oh, this is that Cite Machine Plus. I don't want that one. I want the free version. There we go. No, still don't want that one. Here we go. Bib citation will work just fine, right? So all I'm doing is I'm just going on and searching for like bib citation. There's also auto bib, there's easy bib, right? Like all of these different websites are places where they'll automatically create a citation for you. They're pretty damn good now, right? They used to be really, really spotty, but they're getting really good. The only thing, and that's one of the things that Atticus also talks about in LR10, especially because like all of the online databases we use, they'll generate automatic works cited pages for you. Websites like Bib Citation, Easy Bib, Auto Bib, they'll all do it for you also. But what I would recommend is still, just because they can be a little bit spotty, if the stakes are pretty high, like your research paper or something you're submitting for LR10, I would just really quickly, after you have it generate them, just check it to make sure it's okay. So for example, if I were to do a search for books, I could search for the actual book, right? And then I can click the book and there is a version of the book and it's already cited in MLA format for me. The only difference is this is the British version of the publication of the book, so it's going to look a little bit different than ours, but you can see the format is still exactly the same. So I could also go to like a website like AutoBib, same thing, right? If I go to AutoBib, one of the things that you could do is you just make sure that you have MLA clicked. And then all I do is I take the book number. So for example, if I have Blind Spot, and you can find the book number if you don't have the copy of Blind Spot because I didn't require you to buy it, but really easy. If I just go to Amazon and then I do a quick search for Blind Spot, and then once I find the copy of Blind Spot, you could just do a little search for the book number within Amazon. It gives you a breakdown of like what the information is in the book. So I have the ISBN. So I just copy the ISBN and I take it over here to AutoBib and I just punch it in there and I click Get Citations. There it is right there. So it just automatically generates the copy of the works cited entry for me. And then what I could do is I could just take this, copy it, and then paste it right over in my works cited page. The only thing that I would say is if you use one of these auto generators, when you take it and you copy and paste it over into your paper, you just got to make sure that you adjust the formatting. Because sometimes like the font will be a lot smaller or the font could be bigger or it could be gray instead of black or whatever the case is. So just go ahead and make sure that you check it out and see if you have to change the formatting. But like these tools are great, right? They work really, really well. Every once in a while, they could be just a tiny bit off, but for the most part, I would say like, I don't know, 90+% of the time, they're going to be correct. Any questions on citing the books at all? So if you do then an electronic source, one of the things you can use is you can continue to use OWL, right, to figure out how to be able to cite danger of a single story. But the other thing that you can do that's really easy is you could just do how to cite a TED Talk in MLA. And we're writing in MLA 8, right? So if I just go to this, it'll give me a bunch of different entries on how to cite a TED Talk in MLA. and then I could just click it. And depending on what the sources are, right? Sometimes these WikiHows are like, they're okay, right? Like, I could also go into Purdue's OWL, and then we're going to go back to where we were. That WikiHow looked okay, but I don't really like using, I don't want to use that source because it's not super credible in other places, but I'm going to just do MLA works cited. Go to my basic format. Now, when I'm here, I can go to electronic sources. And sometimes you have to dig a little bit to see if what you're looking for specifically. Entire web series, page on a website, ebook, image, articles. Let's see if we can find specifically. Citing a tweet, citing a YouTube video. So this could be one of the ways that you could cite it, right? So for example, one of the things you could do is you could just say, oh, I'm citing a YouTube video, because you are citing a YouTube video. So it depends on if you're citing specifically the TED Talk, or if you're citing like directly through TED, or if you're citing the YouTube video. So the way that I linked it in our page would be totally appropriate to cite it as a YouTube video, right? So all you would need then, same exact thing here. Just take this, you would copy it over, and then you would put in the information for a DJ's dating for a single story. So her last name, first name, title of the piece that you watched, that it was YouTube, who uploaded it, which would be TED, right? When it was uploaded, and then the last little thing you would do is just literally copy and paste the URL to put it over there. The other thing that you can do is, let's see if we do a search for interview. Let's see. Here we go. So this one would be more likely what you would use, right? You could also use, totally fine to use the YouTube version, but if you saw, I'm just making sure they don't have one specifically for TED on here. Doesn't look like it. So it would be this right here. So you would be, this would work totally fine, right? Because you're citing a speech or a lecture or an oral presentation, and you would do this specifically for a DJ's information, right? So same exact thing. You would copy it over. So you would need the speaker's name, the name of the speech, right? And then you would also need the name of the venue and the city, right? You would need where it came from and the date of that information. And so everything that you would need, whether you're choosing to do the YouTube version or if you're choosing to do the TED version, if you just go directly to TED's website, everything that you need on the information of like where she gave this, when she gave this, all that kind of stuff, and the URL is just listed right on the page. So again, same exact thing. All you do is just grab it, copy it over, put in the information for either if you're citing it as a YouTube video or citing it like as a digital version of a lecture, and then take it, copy it over, put all the information, and you're done. Any questions at all in putting the works cited together for this essay?
Yeah. So what happens when one of those not sources, but like details you're trying to get for the citation isn't there? Just don't use the source overall.
No, what do you mean by is not there?
Like they don't provide that information.
So like for example, you mean like if the publication date is not there or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not going to happen with these sources, but if you're missing things, and it'd be kind of hard to think about of a situation where that would happen, but like if that ever does happen, definitely still use the source, but just like you could reach out to me, or you could reach out like when the research, like the chance where you might see something like that happen, but it's still really, really unlikely, would be maybe when you're doing your research paper, as you ran across a source where there's been times where I've been like, I ran across a source, but it seems really difficult for me to know how to cite this correctly or where all the correct information is to cite this. And so I would say if you ever run across that, like ask me or ask Atticus, because this is like his expertise, and we'll be able to help you find the appropriate citation for that. So I think what the problem will be eventually, maybe when you're writing your research paper, is it won't be as much that the information's not there. It's sometimes we went across sources and we're like, I'm not quite sure what this source is, right? Like, is it from an online journal? Is it from, a website? Is it a digital source, right? And so sometimes we have to kind of like evaluate what type of source we have, where it's not quite as clear cut as like, oh, I'm holding a book in my hand and this is how you cite for a book, but more figuring out what type of source you have and how to cite that source appropriately. But never leave a source out of your paper because you're having trouble with figuring out how to cite it. Like, we can definitely work through it together and figure out how to cite it.
Okay.
Cool. Any other questions? So again, super duper straightforward, right? Literally just taking stuff, copy and pasting it over, putting in information. You can use, auto generators, things like that if you want to. But the whole point of me giving you this homework over the week of having you work on the works cited page is just to make sure that like everything looks good, like you're able to kind of like follow along, put all the stuff in there as it belongs, right? It's only worth a few points, but then literally when you put your essay together at the end, you just copy and paste that over there. This week, like the kind of just kind of give you an overview, I gave that on Canvas, but this week is just continuing to work on the essay. Thursday, I'm going to have a more extensive mini lesson because we're going to be talking about putting together concluding paragraphs, right? And how we kind of give our essays that final sense of analysis. Your goal through this week will be to continue to work on your essay, right? Think about how you pull those quotes into your essay, build on your ideas, right? Next week, your essay is going to be due a week from this coming Sunday. So that's the 18th, I think is what I'm pulling the date out of my head, but I'm about 99% sure. Yeah, the 18th, right? So that means all of next week, what I'm going to do is I have my regular office hours, but I'll have some additional times and I'll post them on Canvas of when I'll be available to meet with people on Zoom. So my hope is that next week, if you have the time available, that you'll be able to come in and see me, and I can read through drafts of your essays with you before you submit them. I could talk to you about maybe places where you have specific questions as you're working on your essays, so that when you submit your final draft of your essay, that everybody who's wanted the opportunity to be able to talk with me and meet with me individually about their essay has had that chance to. So next week will literally just be, that'll be the only thing that you're working on, is just like fine tuning, polishing your essay. I may have like a little bit of a mini lesson because I haven't talked about grammar at all this semester. So I was thinking about putting something together where I talk about like some sentence structure type stuff. But more importantly, I want to make sure that you're able to meet with me individually if you have any questions on your essay, if you want me to read through sections of your essay and talk specifically about maybe how you framed quotations, or your thesis statements, or whatever it is that you want to be able to talk about. We'll have plenty of time to be able to do that next week, because next week's going to be all about just like developing your essay, workshopping it, and meeting with me if you have those questions. Cool. Any questions on anything at all that we covered today, or anything related to class?
I don't know if anybody, are we working on our essays this week at all? Are we supposed to be putting stuff together?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So this week should be like the only like homework that you have is just like submitting the works cited, and then checking out I'm doing the other mini lesson on Thursday, but I'll post a video of that also. But that this week should be just time for you to continue working through your essay.
Okay.
And then next week would be like, hopefully you would have a draft of your essay by then, and we'd be able to check in with each other and look through what you have and any questions you have with what you've written.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys if that was what someone had just asked, but I guess the schooling going on in the background over there.
Oh yeah, no problem. I can't even hear it. That's cool. So if you don't have any other questions, then like I said, you kind of have that example that we did together, right? You literally see all we did was just take the source, copy it over, put in information for what we have. This information that you need for blind spot is written right in there under the assignment. And then same thing with danger of a single story. Everything you need to access is just right there online.